It was a dumb dare, and he knew it. No one really knew for sure, but everyone suspected that Jimmy was afraid of clowns. Clownphobia, the official name, but Jimmy wasn't going to tell him them or be considered an even bigger geek. Plus, Tom was an infamous prankster. That is why, at first, he refused when Tom and Carlos and Harry invited him to go party in the old abandoned Midway. Among locals, it had a reputation of being haunted. Jimmy held his ground bravely until Harry told him that they would be taking their girlfriends along. They also invited Tara. Tara was the redhead cheerleader girl that Jimmy had a crush on since 6th grade, and he also thought of himself so far out on her league that it was entirely a different universe. But lately, she started off by smiling in his direction when they shuffled along the hallways between classes. And out of his league or not, Jimmy was not going to let a chance like this pass him by. The Midway was called by the locals was not a fun place. Local lore spoke about the Bertolini Circus. It had its home base there, and fallen on hard times. It was hard competing with the likes of television, and when video games had finally became common, that was the last nail in the coffin, and the circus went bankrupt. The story goes to say that they were able to make a last grand performance on the outskirts of town. However, one of the performers, a veteran clown called Ibil, had not taken the news too well. In fact, he thought of jobless in the late in life in a field of not exactly booming, drove him over quite insane. No one really noticed until he set the big top on fire after and during the uncharacteristically packed farewell show. Many had died that night, either by the fire, smoke, or trampled by panicked crowds rushing out. But Ible was not satisfied and decided to add to the chaos by releasing the wild animals that mauled a considerable number of people lucky enough to escape the big burning tent. But the most disturbing part of that legend was that Ible was seen in the crowd, bashing people's heads with one of the huge wooden mallets that were used to be putting up the big top, while laughing uncontrollably. Ible had then gone in horribly mad, and he would be rotting until his day in the loony bin if a local sheriff and his deputies put at least 30 bullets in his body. The number of dead had exceeded 200 men and women and children at night. It was not something that the locals really talked about, and since then the place had been abandoned and avoided by locals. But they do tell stories, and they said the ghost of Ible still haunts the place, preying to the transits and the slow-witted teenagers who dare to spend the night at that cursed place. That was a place that Jimmy was being invited to party. Hormones then won the battle over intellect when they dangled Tara in front of him. And so at twilight, Jimmy met his schoolmates at the edge of the town and walked across to the Midway, a tent that had been burnt down to ashes long ago, but the rides, the funhouse, trailers were still rotting away at the advanced states of disrepair. Jimmy had grown up with Carlos and Harry, and they liked to pick on him every so often, but they were closest to the things he had to friends, especially Harry. Tom was a new addition to the group, having to be moved into town only a couple years from up north. Then, of course, there were Harry, Carlos, and Tom's girlfriends, Dinah, Jill, and Heather. But in addition to most excited him was the possibility that Tara would join their little group, and maybe even be his girlfriend. She had fallen to be pleasant for a while, but most of the way there, but Jimmy, crippled by self-conscious, failed miserably into starting anything close to a conversation with her until they arrived. She then made a comment on how creepy the place was, and how strange the way she found it very exciting. Then Jimmy agreed, trying his best to impress her. That evening, even though through the against, seemed to be going real well for Jimmy. After foraging some wood, they lit up a fire between the derelict gaming booths, They sat around the fire while Tom went into his cooler and got a cool beer for each and every one. After drinking a few beers, they sat, laughed, and talked until they started pairing up to be moving away for a little more privacy and makeout sessions, till only Jimmy and Tara were left alone by the fire. Deep down, Jimmy suspected that at least Tom was up to something, and he expected Tom to jump from behind with both a flashlight on his chin or a mask or something to scare them. But all these thoughts melted away as Tara started moving closer and closer until they finally kissed. Sparks flew for Jimmy, and the whole world could have ended right then and there, and he would have never noticed. As luck would have it, Jimmy's suspicions were not unfounded. The guy had intended to plan to scare him, and the whole thing would have had Tom's child brain got everyone to play along. He even managed to convince Tara to play along and keep Jimmy distracted. Harry, who was the tallest, put on a clown suit and mask and came running towards Jimmy, screaming and waving his plastic mallet. Tom, the artist, would be hiding in the bushes. I need to film this so they could post on YouTube earlier. It would be epic, guaranteed, to get at least 1 million hits, so Tom had said. Harry, Carlos, and the girls had met up behind a booth, giggling with some mischief, and have tried real hard not to be heard. Harry and Diana went a little further so Harry could get dressed up. Harry then picked a hidden spot behind a booth and put on his red and yellow clown suit. Then he sat down to put his oversized shoes. He then stood up and felt a strange sensation, as if he was being watched. But after looking around, he brushed it off as excitement for the park ahead. He then slipped on the rubber mask over his eyes. He felt a chill travel up his spine, and that was the last thing Harry ever felt. Diana saw the clown in the clown suit, turning over the corner to behind the booth. She thought about how scary the mask looked. It just looked a typical bozo face, but with twisted demonic expression, and a gaping mouth filled with pointed teeth. Harry was doing a great job at doing the scary walk too, so she thought she came closer, to wish Harry good luck on the prank. Then she realized that whoever was behind the mask was not Harry. He just felt so wrong when she touched him. The clown reached up and grabbed her by the wrists and pulled her closer. She tried to scream, but the clown forced a plastic chicken down her windpipe, choking her. She tried to run and warn the others, but deprived of oxygen, her body just gave out a few feet and fell to the floor. She could hear a maniacal, high-pitched laughter as her vision faded to black. Jill was the first to see him, as Carlos and Heather were busy making out. She let out a terrified scream, put her hands over her face, and did a little phenom impression of being terrified. The couple looked up and tried not to laugh, and started to acting scared too. They thought the prank was still on, but it was when they realized that the real mallet came right down, cracked Jill's skull wide open. Carlos then tried to confront the clown to protect Heather. That didn't go well. The mallet came down hard, square, and hit him in the middle of the chest. His ribs made a popping sound as they cracked and fell to the ground, blood trickling from the corners of his mouth. Paralyzed with horror, Heather watched as the laughing clown jumped on Carlos, and he danced and crushed her boyfriend's body with his oversized shoes. She snapped out of her trance and ran towards Jimmy and Tara. There was nothing but a fake, but the look of terror in her eyes as she ran away screaming. Tara still thought it was a big joke that rolled down laughing as Jimmy got up and ran back down to the screaming at the top of his lungs. She realized that it was not a joke when she looked up and saw the clown had pounded Heather's head flat against the asphalt, and with his very heavy mallet. Her brain was still processing what exactly was going on as the mallet came down and turned it into a pudding. Tom tried to run, but he tripped over a rotting wooden beam on the floor that the clown gave him, now laughing harder than ever. More than enough time to reach him. Tom was grabbed by his ankles and lifted from the floor, vice-mad hands tossed after being spun around a few times. He was stunned when the clown decapitated him with the wire behind. The laughter of Eva the clown echoed at night. Jimmy was found the next morning, babbling incoherently and smelling of urine by the deputy who tried to answer his calls from the terrified dwellers of the neighborhood that he ever wandered into. He babbled almost incoherently about the midday, but in between bouts of wailing and insane laughter. As soon as they received the call on the radio, The deputies then drove to the old abandoned Midway. There were found bottles of local sick bodies of teenagers. They were found of bodies of Carlos Ramirez, Heather Gray, Jill McIntyre, all killed by a blunt trauma to the head. Diana Wilkinson was killed by asphyxiation due to a foreign object being introduced into her larynx, and Harry Vincent, wearing a clown suit, invisible no scratches or bruises on him, apparently died from a heart attack, by the look of sheer terror and frozen on his face. And by the worst had been Tara Johnson and Tom Slanger. The killer had attached the head of the latter to the body with a huge rusty spring, incidentally turning them into a bobblehead. This gruesome detail had to be kept from the media. Jimmy lived on and committed to padded room sanatorium in Jacksonville, but he has not stopped screaming since, except to tell everyone that Eli the clown visits him at night to mock him and torment him. And then he starts to scream again. Well, my pretties, that was Bad Day at Midway, a creepypasta, clown creepypasta written by Booboofinger. My final thoughts on the story: pretty good pasta, actually. Involving, a haunted place, involving a spiritual clown ghost that, is killing people, and especially in this story. So, I really gotta say that this story actually was pretty good, especially with the whole concept of everything of his own self. So, I'm gonna say right now is that the fact that, the story was pretty good, even though it has a really messed up concept with the clown killing people and all that. But I mean, it's actually well done, despite the fact that there's only a couple narrations of it, which is unfortunate. But I really do hope that there are more people that can come and, read that. So it's hard to say, because to be fair, I honestly really thought this was a pretty good pasta, especially with the concept and, especially of how well it's done. I mean, I personally thought it was neat. So, yeah, this one, I remember a few creepypasta narrators actually narrated this story, so I thought, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and narrate this one, because, well, it's pretty good. Like, the fact that, all these teenagers are getting killed by, whatever it is. I mean, that's pretty something. I'm going to be brutally honest that this one was actually a pretty good story. So I really got to say, it honestly has a really amazing, well done. So, yeah, I got to say, this is actually a pretty good story for how well this one is, especially with the concept of, that the fact that all these people went there, and one of them goes to a mental asylum. Now, I remember Mr. Deer, he actually narrated this story, and Mr. Deer is also a creepypasta narrator. I honestly think his content is flat out amazing. Like, I've checked out a few of his stories, so definitely gotta say, it's a great story, and I definitely recommend, you guys, check out his channel. But I also really want to say, you could check out this story. It's on, what is it? Oh, yeah. It's on the regular Creepypasta Wiki. So, if I have to say something that I did not really like, was the fact that this Jimmy person goes to a mental asylum or something. Like, was he, mentally unstable during this traumatizing event at Midway that he ended up, going, mentally insane, that he has to go to a mental asylum? I mean, that doesn't really explain much about that in this story. Maybe if the author manages to find this video, and maybe he or she could comment and let me know more information about it, because there's nothing really to explain about that. So, but it's still a pretty interesting story and has a really good concept for what it is. So I definitely have to say it's still pretty neat and well done. So, I guess with that being the case and that being said, I mean, it's not a bad story. It is a really well done one. But I mean, it could use a little bit of improvement. Like, the main thing is maybe properly explain why Jimmy was, in, a mental asylum or something, or what caused him to be in it. I have a feeling it might have been the trauma that must have mentally, scarred him or something. I mean, if that was properly explained more, then the story would be, then that would explain the story a little bit better of why he got sent to a mental asylum. But other than that, the grammar's pretty good and all that, so I have to say. So, like I'm going to say, this is just simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that is perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these creepypastas. This is simply my own personal thoughts. I'm going to give this story a 9 out of 10. I'm giving it a 9 because it's a well-run, well-done creepypasta involving like a ghost of a killer clown. It does have a backstory of why the place was haunted, which is awesome. The grammar was good. But the only thing I would like to see is maybe if they go and explain why Jimmy was in, a mental asylum. Because it doesn't really explain too much about that. I mean, a proper explanation, like a better one, would properly, make it more sense. Like, maybe the trauma he went through must have mentally scarred him or something. I mean, that would be believable in a sense. But like I said, I mean, you guys can make up your own theories and thoughts. And, because, I just want to know if you guys have any thoughts on it or anything, you are free to do so. So I guess with that being the case and with that being said, what did you guys personally think of this creepypasta? Did you all enjoy it? Did you all not? Also, what we have done personally to help make this story a lot better. Feel free to leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you're new to this channel, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Ring the bell for notifications to when I upload, so that way you guys won't miss an upload. And as always, please roll the outro because I'm out.